Super excited about it. I've been talking to our next guest a little bit today beforehand. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, which is one of the first times actually that we've had a chance to actually on the phone talk with each other in since 1987, believe it or not. But we've been talking a lot today about how just the connection that we've had through our experiences, through music, through what we have gone through in life together, how that has actually connected and kept our bond. We can't even explain it really. We'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm hoping that we're going to have some other people jump on tonight from our group and our tour group that we've toured together. But before I bring him on, I just want to talk to you just for a second about the importance of togetherness. And togetherness in what we've got going on today with the pandemic and what we're all going through. And I think as I think about that, it's so vitally important that we remain connected. We hear the term social distancing. We hear the term, what is it? Making sure that we keep our safe space, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if I really like the term social distancing. I'm not disagreeing with it, but what I'm saying is we have to keep our boundary at a healthy place. The social part of it, I think we got to connect. We need to be socially connecting, particularly in this time, because if I'm in my house, you're in your house, that person's in their house, and we're separated from ourselves and we get isolated, that's kind of a breeding ground for a lot of anxiety and depression. So if we can turn that around from social distancing and looking at we need to be socially connecting, but at the same time keeping our boundaries, keeping our healthy space, keeping our 6 feet apart when we're in public with people that we don't know, wearing a mask, all the things that we can do that they're wanting us to do, I still think we can maintain a good sense of appropriate social connecting. So tonight, I want to bring on here a friend of mine who I've known for quite some time. You're going to hear a lot of stuff about our stories together on the road. We're going to hear about his testimony, what he's doing in the public school systems and his ministry there. Although we can't call it ministry in public schools, but we sure can call it ministry of our heart, of what we take to the public schools with us. We'll talk about how he does that. And we're going to talk about how he maintains positive mental health through all of this stuff. And so I'm going to bring on tonight my friend Bruce Olson from the Continental Singers and Orchestra time in 1987 from Tour G. He's had, I think, 11 years with the Continentals, so he'll talk a little bit about that too. So we're going to bring on tonight Bruce. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
And I want
I'm
to say
glad to have you.
special salute and shout out to all the Continental friends out there that, can you believe that many, what has been 30 some years has slipped by. So it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. 1987, can you believe it, that we were actually together on the road? It seems like it was yesterday in some respects, but at the same time, how far of a distance is that? That's 3 decades. That's
Right.
crazy. I wasn't even 2 decades when we toured. I mean, that's how far back it's been. So
Right.
it's
You were
funny.
15, right?
I was 15 at the time that we left, at the time I was accepted to Continentals. And of course, I turned 16 on the road. I can't remember exactly where we were, somewhere in Arizona or Texas. All I remember it was hot, 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 hot. And I went to sit down on a stump that on the side of at this roadside park, and I almost sat on a snake. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I almost sat on a snake for my 16th birthday as we were touring on the road. But yeah, so it's crazy. It's crazy how long of a time it's been since we've actually had a chance to just sit and talk with each other. So I appreciate you
What
coming on tonight and doing this with me. It's
you
really a
bet. It's a
pleasure
real
to have
honor.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, Bruce, it was 1987 that we toured. You toured much before that. I say much before that, not like you're 25, 30 years older than I am, but you had been doing it before me. When in Tour G 1987, how long had you actually been on the road?
Well, I started in 1981 when I was still in college doing my bachelor's degree before my junior year. Started as a trumpet player, eventually moved up to assistant director. So I really toured my entire 20s, was spent, each summer was spent on the road from 1981 to 1991. And that was 10 years and 11 tours under the belt. And what was interesting about Tour G, what had led up to that was I went at 3 tours as a trumpet player, eventually assistant director. But right before Tour G, I had the privilege and awesome experience of doing one of the international tours, and that was the British Continentals, where I got to go over
Oh
to
yeah.
England for 6 weeks and work with international people from Singapore to Wales to Scotland to Ireland and England. And so what was I tell you that because it was Tour G then that allowed me to go right back the following year,
Yes.
but now with an American group. And share, go to common territory that I had spent time with the summer before.
Right. Yeah. And of course, I chose Tour G. I think I told you this before because a lot of my family heritage, almost all of it is English, and my
Yeah,
mom's side of the family is Scottish. There's some German in there as well. So it was really
yeah.
kind of a way for me to go back and see the homeland, so to speak.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
it was really kind of fun. I've got some pictures. I don't know if you're going to be able to see them, but here, this is one of the pictures I have straight away is the tour bus. Do you remember? You remember the tour bus? Do you see the picture on the screen? I don't know if you can see it or not.
I do not.
Okay, well, our viewers can see it. So this is our
Yeah.
tour bus. I don't know if you had any names for it or not. I called her Nellie half the time. There's a lot
Like a
of
big
memories.
boat.
It's like a big bullet. There are a lot of memories on this tour bus. One of the things that I think I found rather unique and really quite comforting is the time after the concerts that we would get back on the bus the next morning and the times that we had together to be able to just sit and talk and reminisce about kind of what had gone on the night before and the concerts, just kind of what our plans were for the day. And you remember we had our daily quiet times,
Hmm.
right? Our
Yep.
prayer times or our
Yep.
nap times. Now 30 years later, I can say that, right? Our nap times. We were deep. We were very deep. We were very deep in prayer. Some of
Yes,
those
yes. Deep
hours.
prayer.
Yeah,
I
but
think better. I converse. I commune with God better with my eyes closed. Yes.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your memories of being on the road with the Continental Singers and Orchestra?
Well, the tour. There's. It's funny now. I guess it's part of getting older that sometimes I have to say which tour was that person on. But it is funny how every tour was unique, and just as a teacher, it's funny how every classroom, every band that I direct from year to year has its own personality. And
Yes.
Tour G was known as the how should we say the gag tour, the fun tour,
we
tour of surprises. So for those of you who are listening tonight, I'm sure there's lots of stories we could tell, but three specific memories that I have from that tour was that how often it was my birthday throughout every week of the tour at a different church, and of course, and I had to play it up like it really was, because it put it past me to accuse anybody of being a liar on the tour.
exactly.
So there's always a celebration, and sometimes I think I got a cake from the host to celebrate with that night, and of course I had to play that up quite a bit.
So if I
And
may find a picture here, I think that I actually have a picture. If I can
oh no.
find it, Bruce. Oh yeah, I do. Hang on a second. Keep talking, keep talking.
So,
Um,
so that was always, the tour is full of surprises, and when you got a Tim McClure and various people like that on the tour, you just never knew it was coming. But it was a fun tour. The other memory I have is, if you remember in I think it was Scotland or Ireland, there's a place called Gretna Green. Do you remember
Gretna
Gretna Green?
Green. Oh, Gretna Green. We
Gretna
had a
Green is
great.
is whereas I was married off, as I remember. And I
You
don't.
were,
It,
you
I
were
think
married
I
off.
think I was a hat was placed upon my head, and Ruth and I were put in the middle, and there's we've got the tour picture to show it. I don't know if you have that one.
Do
I
you
should have
know?
brought that.
You should have brought. I think I do have that somewhere, but I did not pull that out because I didn't quite know if Beth knew that you'd already been married before.
Well,
So
yes, I've had to break it to her, and it
okay.
was kind of a shotgun wedding. If you remember, Mel Coe had a rifle in his hands,
This is,
and so it looked
I
kind of like
do
a
remember.
shotgun wedding. So for our viewers, it was kind of the Las Vegas wedding of the
Of Ireland.
location of Ireland. Yes, so
Yes.
that was a memory. Yes,
Tina, I
had
was
to live
hoping
that
we.
one.
I was
You know what
hoping.
I remember about that night when it was announced after the concert that this lovely couple came up to me and offered me their little cottage for the evening if I so wanted it.
Yes,
You
exactly.
know,
So Yeah, in case you needed that. So I'm seeing a comment from somebody. I don't know if you know who this is, but it's a lady by the name of Beth Olson,
Oh,
who's saying, "Wait a minute."
yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
I wonder, should we clarify, Beth? That actually it was very much a Vegas
Mock
type
wedding.
wedding. It was very much a
Yes.
mock wedding. We don't have to worry about going through separation of assets, all these things. So I also
Right,
want to
right.
say hello to Vicky McClure. Vicky McClure is saying hello on here tonight. Laura
Hello, Vicky.
Gandolfo. Laura Gandolfo's here. Michelle Maurice is here. So
Awesome.
this is fun. These are some people, guys, that were on tour with us that I'm sure will have a couple of questions for you along the way. Uh,
Okay.
so
Now,
one of the
should
things,
we, Jason, should we tell them the worst gag on the tour that that neither one of us will ever forget?
I don't know if it's the worst or the best, actually. I
Well, I will say that it was the memory that I shared with every tour that I went on after that said, this better never happen again.
So yeah, we could tell that story. I love this
All
story.
right. So
So
I'll tell,
there,
we'll give the short version. Go ahead.
the short version is we had a song that we did called Dry Bones. You remember this? And in the middle of this Dry Bones song, we had all this kind of choreography we were doing, and we had a freeze. And so on your screen now, you'll see, for people who are watching, they'll see the freeze. And during this freeze, what would happen is we would all stop, right, Bruce? The band would stop, all the choir would stop. Just at a certain point in time, we would just all stop. The picture that's on the screen now for people to see, I don't know if you can see it, Bruce, but the picture on the screen now is do you remember how the band would really prank you pretty hard? This is not the best prank yet, but the band would prank you pretty hard. So, how they would all pull out their cameras and start
Yes.
snapping pictures of you. So, this is a picture in the middle of this song that we all stop and we freeze. And so the band takes out their cameras, and when Bruce looks at them and is trying to get them to start back up, they all just start snapping their pictures. So flash bulbs are all going off in his face. Hilarious. The audience loved it though. The audience loved
Well,
it.
oh, yes, of course. But there's one other memory that
Yes.
you can't we have to tell. So we were in a British
Take it, Bruce.
church,
Yes,
and
we
it was
were.
so narrow that usually the band would be in front of the choir, but the band had to be placed blindly
Yes.
behind the choir that night because there was no other room or space for them to be.
Right.
So this was the band's opportunity to act out, shall we say?
Yeah, I think the
And
band was
so,
secret. I think the band was secretly irritated that they had to be put behind the choir.
yeah, yeah, I think
I
so.
really think that's what it was.
And then was it your ear in your solo?
It was my ear right before my
So
solo.
so my memory is during the song that Jason had a solo called "He's Alive," big
Yes.
solo, that I see a hand reach up behind Jason, and I couldn't tell at first what it was, but we smelled it. And lo and behold, one of the band members, I think our innocent Scott Kasner piano player, who is
I
meek and mild, was the
yes.
culprit,
Yes.
who then squirted toothpaste onto your ear.
Can I tell you that it was not on my ear? It
In
was
your ear, maybe.
in my ear. so so where you guys were smelling it, I was hearing
Oh,
it. It was like this
and
big right in the
yeah,
middle of that freeze. And so if you remember, I was kind of facing this way with the right because that's how you got it in my ear. So I was that side of my face was facing the orchestra or the band. So whenever
yes,
we stopped the freeze, Bruce, what I did is I took it in my hand and just swiped it down to get it off of me because I knew
right.
I was coming up next. So at this point, there was white Crest toothpaste all over all the band members behind us.
Yeah,
Don't know if
right.
they quite thought they hadn't thought that through. So
No,
so
no.
carry on, carry on.
Well, so that's the I think that was the next day speech of you went over the line. that I gave to every tour after that, and so that they knew what the line looked like.
Let me tell you.
But
So on the screen now, I've got a picture for everybody to see. It's of me singing "He's Alive," and Tim McClure sent this picture to the Facebook page that we all have. And on this picture, he has taken white out and he has marked this big, huge white spot on the side of my face.
oh,
Part of that story that I think is so funny, honestly, is that by the time that we had finished there and we got to the point where my solo was coming up, it basically at that point I had to get up next, and because where we were in the church, I had to kind of face this direction to the audience. So
yeah.
here was the side right there, all the toothpaste was. Mind you, I had taken it with my hand and slung it. So when I would hold the microphone would slip down my hand. So I kept
Uh,
singing and pushing the microphone up on my chest the entire time
right.
I was singing that song. And I look over at Lori Marie. Hopefully, Lori Marie is going to chime in here in a minute if she's on. But I look over at Lori Marie and she's doing this number. She's like, so
Yeah.
smelling, and then she kind of looks at me. And then next thing I know, Lori goes like this. She goes,
A double take. Double
double
take. Yes.
take, triple take, quadruple take. But anyway,
Yeah.
fun stories. That was definitely over the line. But I want you to all know, everybody who's watching this, Bruce, 35 years later, I'm telling you, I was an innocent party of all that.
Yes, you. Of
Uh,
course.
it was not my fault. I will take no responsibility
You were an
for,
innocent
for
victim
for that prank. I will take no
for that prank.
responsibility for it.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, no, fun stuff. Fun stuff.
It is.
The part about tour though that you and I had talked about earlier, and I think that it's the unique part of it is that 35 years later, or 30 years later, however long it's been, like it was 87, so 33 years later,
Yeah. Wow.
how even you and I can just pick up and just start talking like I had just spoke to you yesterday. Isn't that
Yeah.
funny?
Well, and I think, as a director, what the closeness of those relationships, because of past tours that you witnessed time after time,
Mm-hmm.
that you knew that this group of strangers who came together for a 10-day rehearsal camp,
Right.
and then 10 weeks of every night. I mean, when you think, even when I tell people that we were in a different church, two on Sunday every night, and
Every
two
night.
on Sundays,
Right.
and a different host home every night, they can't wrap their head around that.
Right.
And now that we're older, we look back at that and say, that was crazy. But it was the intensity
Right.
of that kind of travel, and that there, there always has been the two sides of that ministry. One was the external of what we did in a different church to a different audience,
Right.
8 times a week.
Right.
And then there was the internal ministry that happened in the life-changing experiences of the people within the bus,
Right.
and how that bubble. We never could have imagined the intensity of that time together in that isolated bus, and how iron sharpens iron, and lives are changed, and eyes are opened, and God used each other to strengthen and to guide and give new vision and fulfill dreams that, I mean, all of us, couldn't believe some of the places we were and the privileges that we had.
Yeah. Right.
One of my biggest regrets today is, because Continental, the national ministry, really isn't around anymore, and it's the international ministries that have survived. And what's really sad is that in our innocent days of touring, where we stayed in a different host home every night, couldn't be done today anymore.
No.
It's, so our society and culture has changed, even within the church, where I don't know if that's even feasible. Continentals couldn't do Continentals in the year of
Not
2000.
No, not the way that we did it. I agree with
No,
you. I think there's so many things that, well, the world is just so different, and
right,
the relationships are, I don't know. Yeah, we couldn't have done that. The world is too different of a place.
right,
Because when I look back on that in the mid '80s, when you think about what we did, I mean, we went into the homes of complete strangers. every single
Yeah.
night. Now, mind you, they were strangers that were all connected through the body of Christ,
Right.
and so you have that
Trust
comfort. But
element.
however, that doesn't always necessarily mean
Right.
safety. I mean, we had to always be careful, but I don't know how comfortable people would be with that today. Not just the Continentals, not
Yeah.
just us touring, but the people who would invite us into their homes.
Right. Right. I think that's what has changed in our culture that doesn't allow for that to happen anymore. And think of how rich that experience was as you rubbed shoulders and ate breakfast with them and stayed up too late the night after the concert and you just wanted to go to bed. But the
Right.
conversations that
The
that occurred,
conversations continue.
there's ministry within that home too.
Do you know, and this has happened for me, I don't know how many other people have done it, but there was a couple, Val and Colin Templeman, that I stayed with in England. That was in
Mm.
Grimsby, and I talk to them about once a week, still, to
Really?
this day,
Wow.
still.
Yeah. Isn't that
Uh,
amazing?
yeah, it's
So,
amazing. They've been a part of my life for 33 years, and I've been a part of
yeah.
theirs for 33. They sent me wedding gifts. They've
Wow.
sent, yeah, it's just crazy the connection that we had, and I think in just I don't even think we were there 2 days. I think it was one day,
Yeah.
one evening
Right.
of how big of a connection that was. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's where when we talk about the internal aspect of what happened in our lives. I mean, when you think about the community within that bus,
right,
and we could complain about the diesel fuel and lack of air conditioning or whatever it was, but we are all in it together. And I think the internal aspect of the ministry is that we're down in the trenches together. We're sweating, bleeding, and
right,
rubbing up against
right,
each other. And but there's growth that happens in the
right.
trenches,
And I
and
think
that's
that
what we experienced.
And I think the heat, the air conditioning, the blood, the sweat. I think that was all when we were without air conditioning, going through the going through the Death
Across
Valley.
Texas.
No, I
Yeah,
was in
yeah,
Death Valley through Arizona. I think it was.
that's right. Wow.
But
But
it is
that's
interesting.
where community and rubbing shoulders and remember we had our seat rotation on
Yes,
purpose so that you
yes,
couldn't isolate. You had to
right,
rub up against people that were different than you and had different
right.
thoughts, and that's what iron sharpening iron is all about.
Yes. And those relationships today, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about it. And for people who are jumping on who are from our group, uh, we've had reunions, and we're going to have another one here soon, by the way. Michelle Maurice and I were just talking about it.
But
Hopefully next summer when we can start all tour or not touring again. Oh my goodness. Yeah, can you imagine can you imagine what the rider would be for that nowadays? I need
oh,
a orthopedic bed when I get there. I need Mark Sanders. Hey, Mark Sanders, but he's coming on blood, sweat, and a few tears. Absolutely, and a few tears. Good tears and
yeah,
bad tears. That's the other thing about that iron sharpening iron you're talking about. But
right,
we've done these reunions. Bruce, and we've gotten together, and years later, because of that experience of how connected and
yeah.
it's just lifelong friends, just lifelong
Well, isn't it
friends.
funny how that you can have a reunion and pick up 30 years later and instantly because you share that the values and the common bond that you built to frame who you are
Hmm.
is still an essential part of you, regardless of what other growth has happened and occurred
Right.
in the meantime. And yet that I'm saying this after 11 tours that's the common experience that somehow Continental's provided. Um, and there's a combination of many factors that created that, but we all need to realize how special and privileged and unique. I was telling you, isn't it amazing after touring that I would venture to say many of people that have toured, member of the members, could look back and say I have closer relationships or desire to have that same
Right.
kind of close relationship that I had on
Right.
tour,
Right.
even today as an adult,
Right. Absolutely,
and
and
that
not
you
to
cherish those
and
those
it's
things.
you do, and it's not to discount the friendships that we've gained since. I have very
Right,
dear friends of mine now that I've met, in college and met, in my adult
right,
life who are very good and very dear friends to me. But it is a very different experience than like for me, for example, being so young and impressionable at 15 years old, coming onto a tour bus with this group of strangers that I didn't know, who took
yeah,
me under their wing, and such an impressionable part in my life, to be able
yeah.
to have those, and it's very different. It's not that type of relationship is solidified for life, I think.
Well, at the time, you don't realize that that is a unique relationships
Right.
that you're building that you're unlikely to
Right.
have later in life.
And many people never get to have that type of an experience, and I think that's where we're
Right.
very fortunate. I count myself very fortunate for that experience, and just what it did for me personally too. I've talked to you about that, about just how I was able to overcome a lot of my own anxiety and my own sense of self doubt and sense of performance anxiety. I'd always play the piano. Ironically, I'd never sang until I came on tour. I don't know if you realized that. Did you know
Well, I
that?
didn't. Well, not until, no. That was something I guess I just took for granted that you were a choir kid, and
Oh,
then to find out that you auditioned and never sang in a choir, that was
I never
astounding to
sang.
me.
Period. I never sang. Period. I was a
Wow.
pianist, and so whenever I
Mm.
came there and did that, that was one of the things that experience helped me overcome that intense amount of anxiety about just putting myself out there in front of somebody.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to it forms who you. It gives an opportunity to form who you are today, like you're speaking of.
Well, you know, what my analogy is to, and I use this analogy with my students a lot. Um, there is a big difference of wading into the shallow end of a pool and
Yes.
then wading to deeper waters.
Hmm.
That's one experience, a cautious experience. But a deeper experience is when you jump into the deep end of the pool and
Mm.
you got to figure out how to swim. And
Yes.
that is an analogy that I use with my students a lot about, we're going to trust me, and that's where leadership and comes in, where when you have gained the leadership and trust,
Right.
that you can say, you know what, we're all going to jump into the deep end of the pool and trust me that I'm going to get you through it.
Right.
And
You know.
but
So.
and so what you learn in the deeper waters is that you got to survive, and so you find out what you're made of and what God has placed in you. Here you are. You had one of the biggest solos of the summer, and
I had never
you had
sang
never, yeah.
ever,
So you
ever.
jumped into the deep waters,
Yeah, I got
and
hit. I got
and look what
pushed.
it did.
I
And
think
here
I
you
got
are. You got
right.
a performance degree.
I do. I know. But I think, in all fairness, I think I got pushed into the deep water. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I could say I just jumped in involuntarily. But
Right, you got
it was a
pushed. Yeah.
good. But it was one of those things like you do sink or swim. It's like I was telling you earlier. I'd never forget that first concert, that first big timpani drum roll, of just how I thought that was I thought it was my heart beating and jumping out of my chest, and then I had to sing, because if I didn't sing, nobody else was going to jump in and sing the solo, so I
That's
had to
right.
do it. And so you're right, it is you just jump in. This is a beautiful segue into what you're doing now, because now you didn't maintain a traditional ministerial job forever. You have gone and transitioned from the Continental Singers and being the director of this Christian organization, Christian singing group, and choir and orchestra, to some church work, but then you went on into public education.
Right.
A very different type of battlefield you're going into. How did you make that transition for you, and speak to like how you're able to use what you've learned through your experiences to now go in and minister in a place where you can't quote unquote minister, but yet you
Yeah.
do. Talk about how that transition worked for you.
Well, I think during my Continental experience, I was always teaching, or I was in school getting a degree of some kind. But I did knock on various music ministry doors to see, because most of the Continental directors, that was what their careers were, and so that was kind of the model. But God has always placed a passion in me to teach. I think that's my gift.
Mm-hmm.
And all the music ministry in a church setting, those doors were always closed as far as a full-time career. And it did come to a point where I had to fully acknowledge that that was not what God had for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that He confirmed to me that music education in the public schools was where He wanted me. And I always say that my classroom is my mission field.
Yes.
And there are times, the public school, I call the public education system a microcosm of society.
Right.
And so when you see a breakdown of the family and lack of respect that people have for law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
teachers, et cetera, it really is a microcosm of a larger society. And
Yes.
so I guess, even though I can't overtly be minister within that setting, what's interesting, and you say, what have I taken? I guess, I look back now after years of experience. You look at what tools did I gain, or what training. Continentals was kind of a training ground for the rest of my life, and what leadership skills, what tools in my tool belt did I learn in Continentals that I could take into education with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times, so a lot of the kids, you can't use scripture, but I can use quotes that parallel scripture. And so,
Right.
I've used things a lot like music is what emotions sound like. And when we talk about
Mm-hmm.
mental health, and why as music educators are we always trying to validate why music is still important and an important part of the curriculum of a
Right.
school. And I always tease my students. I say, well, how many of you got a spine tingling moment the last time you did that math calculus equation? I harass them, and I said, you have the opportunity every day to
Yes.
leave this room with a spine tingling moment. And if you didn't, it's you chose to walk away from it.
That's
And
right.
so, you use those moments, and if music is what emotions sound like, it also allows you to tap into sometimes getting underneath the hood
Yes.
and getting a student to start to say, as a human being, who are you? What are you made of? What does this music portray to you? And obviously, because
Right.
music is subjective, it allows a lot of conversation that leads down different paths, and knowing how to
Yes.
lead and guide that and direct
Yes.
that to a place of learning and intimacy that
Yes.
that can occur between
And
you as teacher and student. And that's where the mentoring
right.
and what, for music teachers, we do programs.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a kid. The reason I love being a teacher is I get to, unlike an English teacher or math teacher who sees a student for one semester or
Mm-hmm.
trimester, I
Yeah,
get to
you
know
get to see
kids,
him year by
families
year.
for
Yeah.
4 years.
That's
And I
right.
do build relationships. And it's through those relationships, just like when we're evangelizing. Look how many of our churches these days now, it's all about personal evangelism and through relationships. Well,
Yes.
that's what I do every day in the classroom.
And,
So,
and, and again, that's Christianity. That's what relationship is.
right,
Christianity is that relationship with Christ. What you're doing is
right,
you're modeling that, you're letting them experience that,
right,
where they don't just have to hear about it, they actually can get in touch with it. And you talk about music. The music is what emotions sound like. A lot of times I say too that music speaks when words sometimes can't.
right.
It's that same kind of a concept that how it just goes straight to the core. I go to New York quite a bit, and not recently, but I go quite a bit, and I always go to the Met. Always, I'm always at the
Hmm.
Met on Thursday nights when I get there, and a lot of times, that's it's going to be in Czech or Italian or whatever the language is, and
Right.
I don't speak fluent Czech. I don't speak fluent Italian. I don't speak fluent in French and all these things. But whenever you go and you're there and you hear the music and you have that spine tingling moment that you're talking about because you're in touch with it,
Right.
it is amazing that how you can walk out a totally different person because you've experienced that
Right.
than you did when you walked in. And it's
Right.
every bit of what you're talking about being one with that music, and then how you utilize that in the classroom as being that mentor to teach people how to do that.
Well, and
That
my
healing part.
mantra, I've this has been my mantra over the years, is I teach life through
Mm-hmm.
the tool of music.
Mm-hmm.
And how many conversations open up, but music is really just the tool. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the end result. As a teacher, I always, it's what happens in the classroom. I always tell my students, do I have my band director hat on? Or when I'm outside in the lobby saying goodbye, tell me your stories. Tell me what else is going on in your life. But it's
Mm-hmm.
helping them to differentiate what it means to get down to business and accomplish a
Right.
task together.
Right.
And that's a group effort, and lots to be gained from that. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also saying, but you matter as an individual too. And that's where the
Right.
conversations outside of the music realm allows you to springboard into other things.
Yes, and you do that well. And this is I didn't bring you on here to toot your own or toot your horn for you because, but I do want to validate what you're saying because as a 15-year-old who came on
Mm,
tour, who had never been away from home like that long before, for that it was like a 3 month period that we were gone, and to
right.
tour all over the U.S. through the United Kingdom, all of that. You made it possible to feel comfortable in doing that because of your leadership. Uh,
Mm,
Everything that you just said resonated with me as I think
mm,
back 33, 34 years ago, where we were there to do a task. We were called to do a task. We were spot on when we were doing the task. But outside of that, there was never a day went by that you didn't care about each individual on the tour. That
mm,
I think is what made you such a successful director. I
mm.
didn't obviously tour all 11 tours with you, but I think out of all of those 11 tours, I'd have people who agree with me. And then you just see you take that and to utilize that for all of the students that you've touched throughout your career as a public educator is a gift. It's a gift to your
Well,
district. I hope your district's watching this. People, you got a gift because that's what you just do naturally, Bruce. You do.
Well, thank you. What's interesting is with the Continental experience. I think the other thing, if there's one holdover, that isn't it amazing how you throw people on that bus? You travel throughout the United States. In my 11 tours, I went to 25 different countries, and it's being in those unique settings that change lives. You're out of your comfort zone, all that stuff. And so, if there's anything that I've taken with me from Continentals is I do have a passion and love for travel and touring.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been very enjoyable in my 30 some years teaching is I have continued that tradition. And I now teach at the high school. The irony and joke in my life, God's joke in my life, is that I now teach at the very high school I graduated from. And when I came into the
Really?
program 19 years ago, back into my home school, my alma mater, I the group had never toured before, and so every 3 years in the last 19 years, we have done an international tour. And
Wow.
so what's unique about that, and this is where the connection to Continentals and knowing what different environments and settings, and I always say when you can blow a teenager's mind, you're succeeding. And so when I can
So
take
true.
these confident, cocky teenagers who
Yes.
feel really big stuff at home, and then you
Yes.
take them out and you throw them in the deep end of the pool, and we're going to perform besides.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, they trust you and say, "Okay, whatever you say." And
Right.
so that's been a common experience within my public school teaching that I've been able to continue knowing that that is a life altering, mind blowing, open your eyes to a bigger world scenario that changes lives. And
Right.
if after I retire, if I hope that what memory I have left with a lot of students is, Mr. Olson, it was that when you took us to Prague, and when it's that I was the one that was able to provide that experience that they will never forget.
Right.
That's how I know I've touched lives. You know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
those are the interesting connections between what I learned in my training years of Continentals that I
Hmm.
said, some of those things I can still do.
Absolutely, you still do in a different format, in a different way, maybe. But the ability to touch the soul and to connect with the soul, to encourage them to reach their own full potential,
Right.
is the common thread through all of that. And it's
Mm.
exciting. It's exciting you're still doing that kind of thing, and you never get out
Yeah.
of music. I always tell people music is one thing that will remain. I mean, I may not be able to walk when I'm fit. Well, I am 60 or 70 or 80. I'm not be able to walk or play sports like I used to, but
Right.
I can still sit down at the piano. I can still experience listening to music and have that connection. And so it's something
Right.
that's with you forever. It's just with you
Yep.
forever, and that can't be taken away. I have just a quick
Absolutely.
question. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but who was your favorite tour?
Well, Tour G, of course.
Well, I just wanted to just clarify.
Well, and you know what? In asking a question like that, that's really like asking who's your favorite child.
Of course, of course. So
You
we all
know.
know we have one and two.
Right.
No, I'm just joking. You,
But
you know,
it's
but it's
every tour again has its own personality and
yes,
uniqueness to
yeah,
it. When I look back at 11 tours, I in 1987 I toured and when it was still East and West Germany and went past Checkpoint
mm,
Charlie and did a concert in East Berlin.
yeah,
So
wow,
and then being in Israel, being in New
yeah,
Zealand and Australia, being in Russia in 1990 before communism fell.
that
I
is
mean, there's
incredible.
all those
Yes,
uniqueness of every tour and looking back and saying, God, was I really there? Was I
yes,
really in Kremlin, in Red
it's,
Square? I mean,
it's amazing.
eh, it's all those things that you look back and wonder, God,
Yeah.
how did I end up there?
Well,
You
and
know?
when we were in Ireland, when we were in Northern Ireland, and we were in Belfast, all of the Steins were saying, Belfast says no. I don't even know what they were saying no to, honestly, because I don't know if I don't know if I was even old enough to figure it out. But one of the stories that my parents always love to hear and love to tell people is the evening that I called them. Well, it was during the day for us. We were in the UK, but I called them up on the phone and I don't know, needed money probably or something, just saying hello, and and my mom is like, "You're gonna have to talk loud, or something's in the background." And the next thing you hear is just you hear this, and what it was a tank. It was a tanker truck. The tanker
Oh,
truck going by, and
yeah.
and we were there at a time. I think that there was a lot of upheaval,
Mm,
political upheaval, and maybe there was some religious tension. And even when we were there, I remember in my host family that we got up the next morning to find out that there were a couple of churches that were burning, just
yeah.
blocks from where we were staying. And you look
Right.
back on that and you're thinking, wow, we were there right in the middle of a lot.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Sarah
Exactly.
Bassett's jump on. Sarah Bassett, hello. She was tour A, summer of
Oh,
'03 and spring of '04. Another
oh.
fellow ex-con. Hello, Sarah.
Well, welcome.
Yeah. So
Who did she
Beth,
tour with?
who did you tour with, Sarah? Who was your tour director? We'll find out from her. Mark Sanders says, "Well, now you're just bragging, Bruce. I know what you're bragging about, but." And Beth also said, by the way, your wife says that the tour that you met her on was your favorite tour. So
That was yes, I
you
have
might
to
want to
say that.
rephrase what your favorite tour was right after
Yes.
tour G. So your second favorite tour was the tour that you met Beth.
Well, and after all those tours, where else was I going to meet somebody? But Beth and I met in summer of '88, and then she ended up coming on tour with me.
Oh,
I
that's
did two tours back to back, so I was literally on the road for 6 months, and
uh,
she was on tour with me. I was touring on tour 1988, and then she came and auditioned for me,
I see.
and showed up on my
Oh,
1988 fall
wow.
tour.
So she
And
showed up.
um, and then the rest is history. We ended up getting married in '89, and then we toured together as a married couple for 3 tours, which was awesome.
That is
Nothing
really
better
cool.
than that was a great experience to share with her.
Yeah, well, Tim and Vicky McClure were our tour couple, and
Yes,
they were pregnant with Melody all through that
yeah,
tour. So Melody,
unbelievable.
we always say that Melody is a she's the youngest tour G member
That's right.
that's out there. So
And she was there all
Sarah,
the way
she was
along.
there all the way, and she didn't have to get in trouble. She didn't have any toothpaste in her ear either.
That's
Scott,
right.
just saying. Sarah Bassett said that Grant is it Vutske? I don't know Vutske. Grant for summer of '03, and then it was Cameron Bonner who she toured with in summer of '04. Do you know either of those, Cameron Bonner or Grant? It's Wutzke, so Vutske, I think maybe
And
is
I
how you
don't
say
know
it.
them because that was really a different generation. My last tour was 1991. And
Oh
so,
yes,
after 10 years, the new directors, I kind of lost touch with them.
right. And so Kim Canny says hello. By the way, she's here as
Hello,
well.
Kim.
I know. Look at all these people showing. This is like a little mini Tour G reunion, and we're getting some honorary Tour A members in. So if you're an
Awesome.
ex-con, you're an ex-con. There's a lot of us
That's
out
right.
here on Facebook. There's Cher Floria. You gotta love to know Cher Floria is to love Cher Floria. What can I say?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
she's been so instrumental on Facebook of pulling so many of Continental singers together and Cher's Continental. I think it's
Yeah.
Cher's Continental Ministry Facebook page. I don't know if you're a
Right.
part of it, Bruce, but if you're not a part of it, we'll pull you in. You're probably a part of
Yeah.
it, though.
Yeah.
But it's really really cool how she is just Mama Khan is what I call
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. No,
How she's
she's kind of the lifeblood of just
yeah
what the olden days were,
yeah
and she's really kept that going.
right, and of course Cam Floria. One of my favorite stories about Cam, I tell I think I told you, in my 15-year-old self who was self-conscious and all these things, and Cam shows up for one of our concerts, and Cam was the director. He was the director. He was the
President.
creator and president of Continental
Yeah.
Ministries. So he shows up in Gilbert, Arizona. I tell you, I'll never
You
forget it.
remember the city
I
even.
remember it. It was like 8:03 in the evening when I heard the comment. No, I'm not quite that traumatized by it, but I thought it was funny because he came and I was singing "He's Alive." This is a song that I sing every night, as you said. Never had sang in front of anybody before in my life until I did that. And I remember afterwards he had these rave reviews about how good it was, and the band was great, and the choir had tight harmonies, and everything was good, and the young soloist did a really good job too. But could you tell him to sing the melody? I was like,
Oh,
okay,
oh,
I guess I better sing the melody from this point forward. Whatever the melody was, I thought it was artistic licensure. Oh,
right.
goodness. So, with all this going on, Bruce, I know, as general as it may be, we all have skills and coping mechanisms and things that we do. Mark Sanders says Jason has a steel trap mind. It's called trauma, Mark. It's called trauma.
Trauma.
No, but there's things that we all can do to maintain a positive mental health in the crazy world that we're living in. What is maybe two things that you think maybe is key in helping people that you come across, like your students, for example, and people in your life, that you can encourage people to do, maybe that you and Beth do as a family, to maintain a positive mental health and positive outlook on life?
Well, we're all dealing and living with COVID-19, and
Right,
um, obviously students, and it's a national, well, it's an international world
right,
phenomenon
right,
going on, and the anxiety that it's causing, obviously, in our students,
right,
but just as well, the anxiety that it's causing amongst uh, teachers as we're preparing. In fact, we just found out last week that we're going to do a hybrid model,
hmm
and I happen to teach in the largest school district in the state of Minnesota, and we have almost 40,000 students.
my
So
goodness.
what's the anxiety of being thrown into distant learning, online learning last year? And I'll just tell a little analogy that I have. I've made my living playing my trumpet and waving my arms, conducting,
hmm That's right.
and to have had that rug pulled out from underneath you, and now my wife would be the first one to tell you that I'm not exactly a technology wizard.
hmm
And so the analogy I've used or said to people is my anxiety level has also gone up because it was taking away my baton and taking
hmm
away my trumpet, and then and now it's technology. And the
Right.
analogy is you might as well have put a violin in my hand and said, you have a concert in a month, go.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
was that's my analogy to the anxiety that caused, and not just
Yeah.
for me, but I never had a need or a use for technology per se within the field of what I've done for 30 years.
That's right. Right.
So, I guess what obviously we're still in the dark and waiting for information to know how to proceed and what our curriculum is going to look like. But in the midst of that, it's made me have to ask questions like, well, going online, what's missing? This is a worldwide phenomenon that, all districts are dealing with, whether it's hybrid or online learning or whatever. But I think the biggest tragedy that we all have to be aware of with mental health is
hmm
it's for students, it's the disconnect
Right.
and the
Right.
isolation.
Right.
And that's where, when I, as a music teacher, and I have a relationship with students over 4 years, and you're building on that trust over time, and now that's severed and it's gone. And so, how do that connection? How do you achieve that online? And I think that's the big mystery. As I look at it's one thing to have build on the relationships that I've had with students who are not freshmen.
Right.
But now, how am I going to reach out and build that bridge with incoming kids that don't know me?
Right.
So, it's finding, as far as mental health, it's finding those celebrations. Because the anxiety level of last week, waiting and hoping that there'd be more information,
Right.
I escaped. Beth and I went camping and said, it's obvious we're not going to know anything, so we can sit here and twiddle our thumbs and be full of anxiety, or be distracted and go and enjoy each other and our time in a boat, on a lake, in a tent.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's finding healthy distractions. I mean, when we look at mental illness and abuse of alcohol and drugs and sex,
Mm-hmm.
you have a choice to turn to those things that are going to alleviate the anxiety. And are you going to do healthy things that build on your character or destroy your character?
Right. Right.
So I guess, it's being with family and the assuredness, and continue to pray and trust God and say, God, you're still in control. He's never
Yes.
not in control.
Yes.
And do you believe that? And do we believe in God's sovereignty?
Do you know? And I think that the word you just said, I think is the hardest part for a lot of people. I think people can intellectualize their way there. They can think
Right,
their way there. They can even sometimes feel that they're getting there. But it's the belief. Do you believe it? And if you don't
right,
believe what you're telling yourself that you know is true, it doesn't make a difference if you know it's true or not. I mean, you
right.
have to have that belief, and that
Yeah,
belief and that hope can it can make all the world a difference. All the world a
right.
difference. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, man,
So
I
crazy
could
times.
talk to you. I could talk to you for hours, man. This is just for me fun to be able to get to talk to you tonight and share stories with the people who are chiming on and listening. And I could do it for hours. We got to wrap up. I don't want to, I want to be respectful of your time. You've been very
Sure.
gracious
No
to
problem.
volunteer. Thank you very much. And we're gonna get a tour G reunion scheduled very
Sure.
soon. We're gonna do it at a
Well,
time that
we could set
you
up a
and Beth can
tour.
do it.
Just even doing a tour chat would be fun sometime.
Well, Lori Marie talked about that idea as well, and so I think that let's do that in the next couple of weeks. Let's just make that a
That'd be
goal
fun.
to get
All right.
that done. So, thank you very much for coming on and talking with
You
me.
bet.
It was great to see you. Great to talk to you.
I wish
Um,
I could see all the faces, 30 years later, but I don't get to do that.
No,
So
you will. You will.
I will.
When we do the tour G Zoom, we'll do a Zoom conference call. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thank you, and God bless to all of you. And I'd love to hear your stories.
very yes. There are some really cool stories, and I think what I'm going to do from this point forward, as a matter of fact, is bring on some more of the tour members that have toured, and let you just hear, not just you, but just everybody out there who's listening to these video blogs, if this is what they're called. I don't even know what this is called, but to let the audience to really be able to hear the stories of how people can persevere, how people can grow, how people can, like I say, fall forward. When we fall forward. We have the opportunity to get up and move again forward,
Yeah.
and see how God works in their lives and how God works in their mental health, and also how they work in their own mental health, to
Right.
continue to keep that positive mindset. So, again, appreciate you. Man, it's good to
Bet.
talk to you, and we'll see you very soon.
God bless to all of you.
God bless you, Bruce. We'll
Thanks,
talk to
Jake.
you real soon. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this episode of Shrink Wrapped. We hope that you enjoy it. Share it with your friends. Share it on your Facebook page. Get it out there, and join me next time. Talk to you soon.